Hello students. You're probably wondering why I come to you tonight via video. Why we didn't have anything to do in the textbook, or why we didn't have any other homework. You may also be wondering why I'm dressed up like this. And then the third question you're probably asking yourself right now is, am I in school right now? Am I in Mr. Britt's classroom? The answer to the third is no, you're actually at home. What we're doing tonight is a form of learning called flipped classroom. What flipped classroom is instead of you coming to class tomorrow, bored out of your mind, I'm going to sit here in class, maybe I'll learn something. Instead, we're going to do it backwards. What we do is, you're going to be at home, like you are right now. I'm going to do the lesson, or at least part of the lesson, via video right now. You're going to get that out of the way. And then what that's going to allow us to do is when you come to class tomorrow, you already have a basis, a foundation for learning, a foundation for the material that we need to know. And what that's going to allow you to do is when you come to class tomorrow, we're going to get right into guided practice. And we're going to be able to work on making connections that are so important to history. We're going to be able to analyze and apply the connections that we make in this lesson to the outcomes of our topic for today. Speaking of which, our topic for today is the War of 1812. We've talked about, we've been going from 1787, when the Constitutional Convention was implemented, and we had this brand new Constitution. We talked about 1800 with the peaceful transfer of power and Thomas Jefferson's election, to the Louisiana Purchase and the expansion of executive powers. We've talked about all that stuff, and it all leads up to another war? No. Mr. Britt, not another war. Already? Yes, already. Some people think that the War of 1812 was pointless. It had no winner, really. Everything went back to the status quo. After the treaty was signed, in 1815 actually, 3 years after 1812, which doesn't make any sense at all, I know, everything basically went back to the status quo. There was no land that was gained or lost. It was just basically back to normal. But other people believe that the War of 1812 was the most important world war in the entire history of the United States, because it was almost like a second war of independence. Because a lot of people believe that if Britain had won the War of 1812 handedly, like it looked like they might before the Battle of Fort McHenry, which we'll get to later, a lot of people believe that Britain would have taken back over, or at least had some control, militarily or politically, within the United States. And possibly the United States and the experiment that was republicanism and democracy of the people would have been ruined only about 20 years after it started. So the War of 1812 may have had a bigger significance. Okay? So first thing we got to do is we got to look at, where is everybody at this point in time in the world? Right? What's going on? Because we know what's going on in America. We know that James Madison is our president, and that we've just come off of these, Thomas Jefferson just really struggled late in his term. There was a huge expansion of executive powers, but we got to figure out where everybody else is at this time. Okay? Great Britain is at war with France. That's the first thing we got to understand, is that Great Britain is preoccupied. That's the way I would describe it. If you're taking notes on this, which I would suggest that you might want to, Great Britain is preoccupied with France. That's important to state. Okay? Because Great Britain doesn't fully invest in the War of 1812 until 1814, 2 years after the war starts. Okay? Canada is under British and French control, depending on the area. Directly above the United States, directly above like Michigan, Wisconsin, which would have been territories back then, wouldn't have been the state Michigan or Wisconsin, Canada was under British control. And that is a point of emphasis for our first battle, the Battle of Detroit, Fort Detroit, that we will talk about in a second. Okay? The U.S. is in the midst of still exploring this Western territory. Okay? The United States has bargained, and I do say bargained in air quotes, with the Native Americans to help get some land. Okay? Matter of fact, in 1809 and 1811, there were 3 million acres of Indiana that were ceded to the United States from the Native Americans. That's just one of many stories like that. But basically, America is moving west. And when I say west, we're talking only to the Mississippi River. So up until the Louisiana Purchase, nobody really had gone past the Appalachian Mountains. It was Appalachian Mountains that ran from Georgia to Maine all the way to the East Coast. After the Louisiana Purchase and Lewis and Clark, we started exploring west to the Mississippi. And it gave people who hadn't had the opportunity to own property that opportunity for the first time in their lives. And that was huge. That was huge for the development of America. But it also put a lot of pressure on our last group of people, the Native Americans. They're beginning to be pushed out. For the first time in history, they've been pushed out off of their land, off of land that they thought that was theirs. Because when France was there, and this is important to document as well, when France was there, they weren't there full time. Basically what they were doing is they had a couple colonists, few, that were scattered all throughout the big Louisiana territory. And then the rest of it was just land for the Native Americans. And they worked well with the Native Americans, not against them like the United States did. So that's where everybody is. We got to talk about causes for the war. Okay? Most directly, the war was basically started because British ships, British Navy, which was huge, 1,000 ships, captured American merchants. And now, people don't know if they were actually American merchants. Most people believe that they were actually British citizens working on American ships. And so they were actually stealing them back because they tried to immigrate to America, and so they were taking back what was their citizens. America did not like that, though. This is America, land of the free, home of the brave, right? We're not going to let that happen, are we? Absolutely not. So America, one of 5 times in history that Congress, the people who are actually allowed to make and declare war, one of 5 times in history that Congress actually does this. One of those was in the War of 1812. That's significant. That is significant. Meanwhile, at home, Native Americans were feeling pressure because the New West had been opened up, like we talked about before. One key individual, one key Native American in the War of 1812 is Tecumseh. Tecumseh. T-E-C-U-M-S-E-H. Tecumseh. Okay? And basically, Tecumseh was a Shawnee Indian in the Ohio Valley, the Ohio region, that stretched basically all the way up, though, to what would be now Detroit, Michigan, and up into Canada. And the big battle where Tecumseh made his name was the Battle of Detroit. Basically what happened is that William Henry Harrison and the Americans, they went up to Great Britain. To Canada. And what they were trying to do was liberate the Canadian people. They said, Canada, we know you don't want to be under British rule anymore. We will take care of you. We will liberate you, make you an independent state. Problem was, Canada wasn't all that upset about it. They kind of liked it. They paid some tributes. Britain really didn't meddle. They just sort of got to do whatever they wanted. They had a little bit of security from a very strong nation. And so they sort of just were like, whatever, we don't really care. We're not like, yeah, but they were just kind of like, all right, whatever. Britain obviously fought back, and with the help of the Native Americans, they defeated the Americans. With Tecumseh's help, they defeated the Americans at the Battle of Detroit. That was a strong blow. Tecumseh also spoke out against Caucasian or white European settlers a lot. One of his things that he said was, brothers, the white people are like poisonous serpents. When chilled, they are feeble and harmless. But invigorate them with warmth, and they sting their benefactors to death. Lots of great adjectives in there from Tecumseh. But basically what he's saying is that when you invigorate the United States, when you treat them well, and you give them a little bit of power, and you secede some of your lands to them, they sting you. They go behind your back. They stab you in the back. They're not your friend, is what Tecumseh is basically saying. Tecumseh would later die in the war at the Battle of Thames, but where the downturn of Tecumseh started to happen was actually at the Battle of Tippecanoe, which was also the upturn. It was kind of a pivotal swing for the War of 1812. The Battle of Tippecanoe was William Henry Harrison, who had multiple run-ins with Tecumseh in the past. Basically, Tecumseh's brother was fighting with the British at the Battle of Tippecanoe, and William Henry Harrison came up there and knew that Tecumseh was too far away to reach Tippecanoe in time to support his brother. And the Americans ended up winning. They ended up winning the whole thing at Tippecanoe. And that sort of changed the outlook of the war as far as Native Americans are concerned. Once Britain got done being preoccupied with France, they turned their focus back to the United States. And the one thing they thought that would work, that would dominate, would be to go to the capital city of Washington, D.C. and burn D.C. to the ground. And that's what they did. They pretty much marched right down our throats and burned D.C. to the ground. Dolly Madison, who makes the little Debbie snacks. Dolly Madison, she's well known for that. She's also well known for saving a lot of documents. And they moved the capital city. They got out of D.C., at least for the time being. And that was really something that if those documents had been lost, a lot of people believe that we would have no archives. Smithsonian may not have even existed yet. Anyway, so the battle continued to turn, and it looked like it was going Great Britain's way. That was all until the War of 1812. The Battle of Fort McHenry in Baltimore, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland. If you've never been there, you got to go sometime. It's awesome. Battle of Fort McHenry. What they did was they blockaded the entire Atlantic Ocean, all the way from what is now South Georgia, all the way up to Boston. They had a naval blockade that stretched that far. That's a long way, by the way. Okay? What they did was their plan was to come in at a split in the blockade and bomb Fort McHenry. And what they would do is they would infiltrate the harbor, and then from there they would begin to stretch out. They've already burned D.C. to the ground. Baltimore, take it over, and they would be set. So they bombed them. They bombarded them 22 hours straight. 24 hours straight. Took people over. Many went to sleep that night hearing the sounds of bombs and believing that when they woke, the British flag would be waving. However, when they awoke, they saw the American flag still standing there. They were able to turn the tide of the war. And they were eventually able to come to a treaty that established the status quo again. It also established American legitimacy. Up until that point, foreign nations thought that America was just some nation. Just a little experiment that would never, a blimp on the map. After the War of 1812, the second time that Americans had defeated Britain, people had to take America seriously. And that's what they began to do. Come back tomorrow take some notes on this video, look at the PowerPoint. Come back tomorrow with the intensity and the passion, ready to learn. Remember, every day we take that next 200 feet towards our end goal of running the marathon, 200 feet at a time. It's all about the process. What am I doing today to get better? Go be excellent. See you tomorrow in class.